Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where each week we give you another episode of what's happening here on our Northeast Iowa 21-acre homestead. My husband Alvin and I have been married for 25 years and we have 7 children. 5 of those children still live at home. Our oldest 2 are married and no longer live at home, so this means we also have 2 son-in-laws and 1 grandson so far. So on our 21-acre homestead, we seek to preserve the self-sufficient lifestyle of our old order Mennonite heritage for the next generation. We involve the children in every aspect of the homestead, from raising and harvesting our own meat, gardening and preserving to fill the family's larder, or preserving the dairy from the family milk cows, plus all the many other skills that develop the character and integrity and relationships of a family that seeks to bring glory and honor to their Heavenly Father. Hello YouTube family, welcome back to another holiday episode of Homesteading with the Zimmermans. Today I'm going to show you how to make stuffing, or in some regions they call it dressing, right? It's the bread and seasoning that you mix together and bake. A lot of people will put it inside their turkey. We never did growing up. We baked it in its own separate dish. So growing up, we always made stuffing homemade, 100% homemade, right? You make your bread, you cut it into cubes, you dry it, all of that. However, when our older children became, when they started working at the grocery store, they came home with stovetop dressing and they're like, did you know you can buy this from the grocery store and all you have to do is add water and make it, and it's so simple. And it's kind of like me when I was in my 30s and somebody said that they buy their pie crust at the grocery store, and I'm like, you can buy ready-made pie crust at the grocery store? Like, I didn't even know it because we always made it from scratch. Now, I was aware of stovetop dressing and my children just weren't. They just knew that it's a lot of work to make it from scratch. So for the last 5 or 6 years, they were bringing stovetop dressing home for our holiday meals. And they're like, let's just make this. It's fast, it's easy. And I'm like, okay, not going to be legalistic about, our stuffing. But fast forward to this Thanksgiving, and I didn't buy stovetop dressing. And the only child that I now have working at the grocery store is our son, and he's not worried about Thanksgiving dinner. It's not on his radar, right? So nobody brought me stovetop dressing, and it's the day that we're going to have our Thanksgiving dinner, right, with just our immediate family. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll get everything else checked off the list, and then I will go to the grocery store and get stovetop dressing. Well, it turns out that we were in the middle of a snowstorm that day, and I wasn't going to get to the grocery store to buy the stovetop dressing. So I'm like, it's fine. I've got the skills. I will just make the stuffing from scratch. And so that's what we did, using the recipe from my childhood. And guess what? Everybody was like, wow, this dressing is really, really good, Mom. And so today I'm going to show you how simple and easy it is to make your own dressing. And not only that, you can make it now and put it in the freezer until you're ready to serve it. So in addition to making your stuffing and freezing it, you can also make so many things ahead of time that will make hosting for the holidays so easy. So we also make our mashed potatoes ahead of time and freeze them or refrigerate them. And I will link that video for you. And what else? Pies. You can make your pies ahead of time and freeze them. And I think I've done a video on that. I will link that video for you. And your dinner rolls. I will also link that video for you. Actually, I'll make a whole playlist on preparing ahead of time for the holidays and freezing your food. But for now, we are going to, if you have bread on hand, you don't have to do this step. But here's what I did for our Thanksgiving meal. I didn't even have bread on hand. So what I did is I used my breadstick recipe because that's a really fast dough, right? And so I'm going to make a single batch of breadsticks, and we're gonna go from there to make our dressing. Hey friends, don't forget that my book is 40% off when you buy it from Christian Book, which is this link right here. And while you're on their page, don't forget to go and look at the free gift that we are offering you for your family holiday traditions. So the very first thing we need is 2 cups of warm water. And then we need 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Okay, I have added 2 tablespoons of yeast. You need active dry yeast, and I always store my yeast in the freezer to keep it fresh and active. And then you need 1 teaspoon of salt. And we're gonna mix that all together. So when I'm making just regular breadsticks, I don't usually add these kinds of seasonings to the dough, but because I know that I'm gonna turn these breadsticks into dressing, I'm going to add some appropriate herbs. And you'll hear me refer to this as both stuffing and dressing because it got all mixed up in my brain when I grew up on the East Coast and now live in the Midwest, because we always called it stuffing or even filling, and more people here call it dressing. So I'm gonna add about a teaspoon of thyme to my dough. And then I'm also going to add some parsley flakes. And some of these are not chopped very fine, so I'm gonna try and get the fine ones. So you can see how my yeast is active because it's nice and foamy. So we just mixed our herbs in. So the only thing we have left to add now is our flour. And I'm gonna start with 4 cups. So I feel like our dough is still a little too sticky. So I'm gonna add a little more flour. And remember, I did measure scant in the first place, so I probably had scant 4 cups of flour in. So I added about 1/4 cup of flour, and we're gonna mix that in. All right, we're gonna call that good. My breadstick dough is usually a lot stickier than my bread dough would be. So we are just going to let that rest until it's double in size. So we're gonna cover up this dough because there's 2 things that yeast dough needs in order to rise, and that is warmth and humidity. So by putting the lid on tight, we're trapping all the humidity, and because it's a little chilly in here this morning because it's like 13 degrees outside, I am going to set this on our heated floor, and it should be double in size in no time at all. All right, guys. It's definitely doubled. It's definitely doubled in size, but that usually happens for me because I'm like, okay, now my dough's rising, and I start multitasking and get involved in other projects. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some parchment paper with a little bit of olive oil. You don't have to use parchment paper. You can just use your jelly roll or any kind of cookie sheet. But because the dough is fairly sticky, you do want it to slide. So I am just going to spread this dough out to cover this cookie sheet. All right, when I make breadsticks, I bake it right now because I don't want breadsticks to be real fluffy. But when I want to make stuffing, I'm gonna let it rise a little longer because I want the dough to be I want the finished product to be a little more airy. So I'm gonna let this rise until it's almost double. Oh, I almost forgot, very important part. So when you are making breadsticks, you'll wanna cut it now into breadstick size, right? But because I want to make bread cubes, I'm gonna cut it much smaller than I would for breadsticks. They have risen to be double or about double. They've just risen quite a bit. And we are going to bake them at 350 degrees for, I'm gonna say 15 to 20 minutes. I will let you know for sure how long I baked them. All right, guys, I baked them for about 20 minutes, and the same as with your breadsticks, you're gonna wait until they turn kind of brown over the top, and they bake together, but it helps to cut them and they're a little perforated, they come apart easier. Anyway, so we're gonna let this cool, and we're going to turn our oven down to 250, but we're gonna let these cool so we can handle them. All right, these are cool enough for me to cut, and I'm really just gonna pull them apart. It's about 18 degrees outside, so they cooled really fast. All right, we've pulled that all apart, and I put them into 2 jelly roll pans, and now we're going to put them into a 250 degree oven. Now, if you already have your bread on hand, like a loaf of bread, you can just cut that into cubes and start at this point. So the reason we want to dry these, and some people don't, some of my aunts, when they made stuffing, they didn't dry their bread cubes first. And then it kind of bakes together, because when the bread gets soggy, because it soaks up your liquid, and it kind of bakes together in more of a, like, I don't know, like a cake style maybe. And I don't like that as well. So I like to dry my bread cubes before I start to prevent that from happening. So into a 250 degree oven we go, and then we're going to stir these about every 15 minutes until they're dry. All right, while those breadcrumbs get dry, we are going to start with our wet ingredients. So I need 1/4 cup of butter, and I'm gonna get that started. I'm gonna chop in 1 small onion. So one of the things that really makes stuffing to me is the taste of celery. So if you have fresh celery, go ahead and fine chop about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of fresh celery. And I've got this dried celery, so I'm just going to chop this real fine. And I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of this. If you don't have dried celery or you don't have fresh celery, you could add about a teaspoon of celery salt. And I'm just going to saute this celery with the onions. So once your onions are sauteed, you're going to add a little bit of garlic. You can add 1 or 2 cloves depending on how much garlic you like. And then you're going to remove it from the heat so the garlic doesn't burn. Okay, so I've got the thyme here. I'm going to add about 1 teaspoon of thyme. I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. Okay guys, the next thing you need is 2.5 cups of broth or milk. I often use a mixture of broth and milk. So I cooked a chicken the other day in the Instapot, and so I'm using some of that broth. And if you know you're going to make turkey for your holiday meal, chicken broth is perfect. And even when we have made ham, I have used chicken broth and it goes well with the ham. So I've got 1.5 cups of broth. And so this is actually all cream, but I'm too lazy to run out in the shop and get a fresh gallon of milk. So I am going to add 1 cup of cream. And then we need 2 eggs. Okay, I'm just going to mix this broth and cream and eggs together with my immersion blender. So now we are going to take our broth and cream and egg mixture and add it to our sauteed veggies. And I like to blend this up again. So this is a good time for you to taste it and make sure that it's salty enough. It should be fairly salty and the flavor should be very bold because all of this is going to get diluted with all of that bread. Speaking of the bread, it's time for me to check on this. All right, so we're all set. As soon as that bread is done, we are ready to put our stuffing together. Can you hear how dry they are now? So we're just gonna let them cool down a bit. This is how dry they are. They should just break apart. So now we're just gonna let them cool a little bit and then we're going to add our wet mixture and toss them all together. Guys, I have all of my breadcrumbs, my bread cubes in this bowl. And we are going to take this cream and broth and butter and seasoning mixture and just toss it with these bread cubes. All right, now that we've got it all mixed together, we're going to put this in a 9x13 pan. Make sure you get all of those goodies out. All right, guys, there is our stuffing that we are going to put in the freezer. So Christmas is still a couple weeks away, so I don't want this to get freezer burned, so I put some saran wrap all the way down against, and then I'm just gonna cover this like this, and this is going into the freezer. And then to bake it, I am going to bake it from frozen. So I'm gonna get it from the freezer and put it straight into a hot oven, and then I'm gonna bake it for about an hour. Normally, if I was going to bake this right now, I would only bake it for 30 minutes, 30 to 45. That would be max. So probably 45 minutes if you get it from the fridge. And if you're making it like from warm like this, because the bread was warm, I would only bake it like 30 minutes. A good internal temperature for stuffing is about 160, 165. So if you're making this just a couple days ahead of Christmas or whenever you want your holiday meal to be, you can refrigerate this for 2 to 3 days. If it goes any longer than that, I would freeze it. But there you go, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that your holiday meals turn out splendid and that, number one, you enjoy the holidays and you don't spend the entire holiday in the kitchen preparing food.